In a grave more than 6,000 years old, archaeologists found two human skeletons locked together in a permanent embrace. They were not thrown into the ground by accident. Someone arranged their arms around each other before the earth covered them forever. That image has survived longer than almost anything else our ancient ancestors left behind. It raises a question most people never stop to ask. Did ancient humans actually fall in love, or did they simply pair up to survive? You have probably been told that romantic love is a modern invention, something created by poets, novels, and Hollywood movies, something too soft and too complicated to have existed in a world of survival and violence. But if that is true, why did people tens of thousands of years ago bury their dead holding hands? Why did they carve figures of couples embracing into cave walls? Why did some ancient graves contain the bodies of two people who died decades apart, yet were buried together anyway, waiting to be reunited? If love did not exist back then, none of this makes sense. And if it did exist, it changes everything we think we know about our earliest ancestors. This is the story of love before language had a word for it. Scientists who study the brain have found that the biology of love is old. Far older than agriculture, far older than cities, far older than writing. When two people bond closely, the brain releases a chemical called oxytocin. This same chemical appears in the brains of wolves, elephants, and prairie voles, animals known for forming lifelong pairs. If oxytocin bonding existed in animals millions of years before humans evolved, it almost certainly existed in our earliest ancestors too. This means the wiring for love was already present in the human brain long before anyone could write a poem about it. Another chemical called dopamine floods the brain in early attraction, creating the same restless excitement people describe today when they cannot stop thinking about someone new. A third chemical, vasopressin, appears linked to long-term attachment, the quiet, steady bond that forms after years together. These three chemicals, working in sequence, describe almost exactly the stages people still recognize in modern relationships: attraction, obsession, and finally deep attachment. None of these systems evolved recently. They evolved over millions of years, shaped by ancestors who lived long before modern humans existed at all. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have found something remarkable. Nearly every human culture ever studied has some concept of a special bond between two people, not just a working partnership for raising children, an emotional bond filled with longing, jealousy, and joy. Researchers surveying over 150 societies around the world found romantic attachment present in the vast majority of them. If this pattern shows up everywhere, in every corner of the world, in societies that never had contact with each other, it suggests something deeper than culture. It suggests something built into human nature itself. Around 1 million years ago, early humans faced a brutal problem. Human babies are born extremely helpless compared to almost every other species on Earth. A baby elephant can stand within hours. A human baby cannot even hold up its own head. This helplessness lasts for years, not weeks. A mother alone in the wild, carrying a helpless infant, faced enormous danger. She could not hunt as effectively, gather as widely, or defend herself as easily. Early humans who formed strong pair bonds had an advantage. A partner who stayed close, helped gather food, and protected the mother and child gave that child a far higher chance of survival. Over hundreds of thousands of years, evolution rewarded those who felt a deep pull toward staying close to one partner. That pull is what we now call love. It did not start as poetry. It started as survival. But biology alone does not explain everything archaeologists have found. In Sungir, Russia, scientists uncovered a grave nearly 34,000 years old. Inside were two children, buried head to head, covered in thousands of hand-carved beads that would have taken months or years to create. Whoever buried them clearly loved them deeply. This was not efficient burial. This was grief expressed through enormous effort. In China, archaeologists found a grave they now call the Hunan lovers, two skeletons intertwined, arms wrapped around each other, dating back thousands of years. In Mantua, Italy, another pair was discovered, locked in an identical embrace, nicknamed the Lovers of Valdaro, buried together around 6,000 years ago. These were not isolated incidents. Similar burials have been found across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Different cultures, different centuries, the same instinct, to hold someone close, even in death. Cave art adds another layer to the story. In parts of Europe, prehistoric artists carved images of couples embracing, dating back over 10,000 years. Some carvings appear to show physical closeness that goes beyond simple companionship. If early humans were only interested in practical survival partnerships, there would be no reason to spend precious time carving images of tenderness into stone. Art takes time, art takes intention, and ancient humans chose to spend both on capturing love. Archaeologists have also found small carved figures believed to represent affection between couples, some tucked into graves as personal keepsakes. Beads, shells, and polished stones appear repeatedly in ancient burials, arranged in ways that suggest they were gifts, not just decoration. Gift-giving between partners may be one of the oldest human customs still practiced today. There is also evidence in how ancient people grieved. Archaeologists have found ancient graves where the surviving partner was buried years later in the exact same spot, sometimes reopening a sealed grave just to be placed beside the person they had lost. This required enormous effort, planning, and cultural memory across years. It tells us something about the emotional weight ancient people carried for the people they loved. Some researchers argue that ancient love may have looked different from love today. In many early societies, marriage was not always about romance. It was often arranged for practical reasons, alliances between families, access to resources, or protection. But practical arrangement and genuine emotional bonding are not mutually exclusive. Even in arranged unions throughout history, deep affection frequently grew over shared years, shared hardship, and shared children. Love did not need to be the reason two people came together. It could still become the reason they stayed. Some ancient societies also show early signs of courtship, small rituals performed before a bond was formed. Body paint, ochre pigment, and careful grooming appear in the archaeological record long before mirrors or fashion as we know it existed. Even then, people seem to have prepared themselves to be noticed by someone they wanted to attract. Jealousy leaves its own trace in the ancient record too. Evolutionary psychologists point out that jealousy only makes sense as an emotion if there is something valuable worth protecting, a bond worth guarding, a partner worth keeping close. If ancient humans felt no attachment at all, jealousy would have had nothing to protect and no reason to evolve. Neanderthals, our close evolutionary cousins, may have experienced something similar. Neanderthal burial sites in France and Iraq show bodies placed with care, sometimes surrounded by flowers and tools. Neanderthal brains had regions associated with emotional processing similar to our own. This suggests they were capable of deep attachment, grief, and possibly romantic bonding tens of thousands of years before modern humans spread across the globe. If love existed among Neanderthals, it means the emotional foundation for love may predate our own species entirely. It may be older than humanity itself. Consider what daily life looked like for early humans. Long days spent hunting, gathering, and surviving harsh, unpredictable environments. Constant threats from predators, disease, and starvation. In a world this dangerous, having one person who chose you, who stayed close through danger, who shared warmth beside a fire at night, would have meant everything. Emotional closeness was not a luxury. It was protection. It was comfort in a world with very little comfort to offer. The need to be chosen, to be seen, to matter to another person, likely felt just as intense back then as it does now. Fear of losing that person likely felt just as painful. The joy of reunion likely felt just as overwhelming. Human emotions do not appear to have changed nearly as much as human technology has. We have traded fire for electricity, spears for smartphones, but the ache of missing someone we love seems to have stayed exactly the same. When we look at ancient burial sites, cave carvings, and the biology written into our brains, a clear pattern emerges. Ancient humans were not simply surviving side by side. They were choosing each other. They were grieving each other. They were holding on to each other, even in death, refusing to let go. The two skeletons found locked in that 6,000-year-old embrace were not placed there by accident. Someone made a choice, thousands of years ago, to ensure that even after everything ended, those two people would remain together. That is not simply survival instinct. That is love, reaching across thousands of years, still recognizable to us today.